Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 2672 relating to employment of domestic workers.
Question now arises upon third reading and final passage of House Bill 2672. Representative Gelser.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2672B extends modest labor protections to certain domestic workers. Housekeepers, nannies, and cooks play an increasingly important role in our communities, our economy, and our homes. Domestic workers make it possible for professionals to do other work by ensuring that their homes and children are nurtured and cared for while they attend to other responsibilities. Despite their significant contribution to the American economy, these workers have been exempt from the basic labor protections offered by the Federal Fair Labor Standards Practices Act since the 1930s. This leaves them at great risk of abuse and exploitation. In recent years, state legislatures have become more aware of the needs and significance of this workforce. If House Bill 2672 is signed into law, Oregon will become the third state in the nation to extend these basic protections to nannies and housekeepers. New York was the first. Hawaii passed similar legislation just last week. Similar bills are also currently working their way through the legislatures in California, Illinois, Texas, Ohio, and Massachusetts. Last fall, the Center for Urban Economic Development of the University of Illinois at Chicago released Home Economics, the Invisible and Unregulated World of Domestic Work, which is the first national statistical study of domestic workers. The study was based on interviews with over 2,000 workers in 14 major cities. The study found that women make up 90% of this workforce, and most are women of color. More than half are the primary breadwinners for their families. 76% of live-in workers make less than minimum wage, and 25% of live-in caregivers report that their working conditions make it impossible to get even 5 hours of uninterrupted sleep each day. 20% reported that their income was so low that there was at least one time in the previous month when they could not afford to have food in their household for their family. 91% of workers interviewed said they would not complain about their working conditions because they were afraid they would lose their jobs. According to the American Community Survey, there are nearly 10,000 domestic workers employed in Oregon. Most work with informal, verbal contracts. Because of the nature of the work, many employers don't see their domestic help as employees, but instead think of them as members of the family who may not need accommodations for adequate rest, food, pay, and freedom from harassment. And in fact, current law does not guarantee that to these workers. They are excluded from those basic protections that we all enjoy. Although most Oregonians who employ domestic workers are committed to providing good working conditions, the fact that these workers lack basic protections and work behind closed doors leave them extremely vulnerable to abuse and exploitation. According to the report, working behind closed doors, beyond the reach of personnel policies and often without employment contracts, they are subject to the whims of their employers. Some employers are terrific, generous, and understanding. Others, unfortunately, are demanding, exploitative, and abusive. The protections offered through House Bill 2672 are modest. The bill ensures that workers are informed in writing of their pay rate, their work expectations, and information about any leave to which they may be entitled. The bill would extend overtime to individuals living outside of the home that work more than 40 hours a week, and to individuals that live inside the home that put in more than 44 hours a week. And it's important to remember that this bill does not extend minimum wage protections, so that overtime is based on whatever that wage rate is that's set for that individual. Employees would be allowed to bring and prepare their own food, and after 1 year of employment would be eligible for personal leave. The bill also extends sexual harassment protections to domestic workers, and it prohibits employers from holding an employee's passport. As I said, this is a relatively modest bill. It applies only to individuals who work caring for a child, providing housekeeping services, or other household work. The bill does not cover any employee who is compensated with public funds, an individual that works for a private home health care agency, or any person providing services for an adult who is elderly or disabled. So it's very, very narrow. The bill also does not apply to a parent or a spouse, children under the age of 21, students, teens providing casual babysitting services, or other people performing casual labor. It's also important to note that this bill does not apply to independent contractors. It only applies to that individual for whom they are in your employ and you control control not only the product of the work, but when and how and with what materials that work is done. For example, if you have a housekeeper that comes to your house a couple of times a month to do cleaning, and they bring their own supplies and they choose which day they come, that person is not covered under this bill. Your housekeeper would only be covered if she is at your home and you set the hours and you provide the supplies and you tell her exactly how to do her job. She would be your employee, not your independent contractor. Violations of House Bill 2672 would be handled with existing processes through BOLI's Wage and Hour Division. If the Commissioner determines a violation has occurred, BOLI can assess a penalty of no more than $1,000 per violation. If the employee elected to pursue a civil action, they would pursue the same civil action that's currently available to all other employees and would be able to recover the greater of their damages or $200 plus reasonable attorney fees. Colleagues, this is a very modest bill that asks us to respect domestic work, housekeeping work, child caregiving, by respecting the people that provide that, letting them know how much they will make, letting them know how many hours they have worked each week, letting them maintain their own passport, allowing them the opportunity to sleep each day and 1 day of rest each week. Colleagues, I hope you will join me in supporting this bill and extending these very basic protections that are afforded to almost every other employee in the state of Oregon. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Gelser, do you wish to close?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for all of the comments. I appreciate that it is a complicated bill. It is true that the Governor of California vetoed a similar bill that was passed over a year ago. This bill was written after that and addressed a number of the issues that were raised there. For instance, this bill does not include the elderly and disabled. This bill exempts public employees. This bill does not call for duty-free lunch breaks for nannies and caregivers and babysitters. So one of the things that's important to remember is that one of the things that makes these individuals so vulnerable is that we do think about these people as our family members. I have 4 children, and we have been lucky to hire people both on a casual basis and on an employment basis to help us do our other work, to help me be able to come here. What helped us to resolve many of those ambiguities, the uncertainty of what time I will get home from Salem, what time the days will end, were resolved in our employment contract because we wrote down exactly what those expectations were between us. When my child was young, I also recognized there was a difference. As a mother, I didn't sleep for years. I didn't have 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep. I know there's several mothers of young kids on this floor here that don't get 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep. But when I work as an employee, I don't expect that my job takes away from me that right to be rested, to be able to perform my job well. As an employee, I may be loved by the family that has hired me, but I am not a family member. I am a caregiver. I'm a hired worker. I need to know what the expectations are of me, and I need to know what the appropriate expectations are that I can have of my employer. I spoke with Legislative Counsel just before coming on the floor and asked the question about kind of traveling. What if you go on a vacation with your nanny? And the Legislative Counsel indicated that BOLI has a lot of rulemaking authority within this bill, and one of the places for rulemaking are those special circumstances when you are traveling, when you are going to another place. But colleagues, even in that circumstance, what this bill says is very, very simple. It says that a person gets to sleep every day if they live with you. It says that once a week you get to have a day off. It says that somebody can't take your passport from you. It says that you have a written summary of your wages and that you will have an agreement about how many hours that you have worked. These are the same protections that we apply to the employees that work in convenience stores, to the employees that work in this Capitol, to employees that work for agencies that provide this kind of care. It's time, I believe, for us to extend these basic protections. It makes these workers safer, it respects the work that they do, and it makes their charges safer. It makes our children safer, and it improves the quality of work that can be done in our homes. Again, I appreciate that this is a complex and ambiguous issue. What's not ambiguous is that this work is important, and these workers are extraordinarily vulnerable and need our help. I will again call your attention to who these workers are. 90% of them are women. The vast majority are people of color. The majority of them who were live-ins said that they were not able to sleep even 5 hours a night. That is why this work is needed. There are 10,000 of these employees in Oregon, and I would urge your aye vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Those of the opinion the bill should pass will vote aye, and those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Representative Berger, how do you vote? Votes aye. Representative Comp, how do you vote? Votes aye. Representative Conger? Votes aye. House Bill 2672, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed.